Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds on our current global situation.
Hmm.
We're looking at a crisis, but maybe not just one crisis, more like systems failing.
Yeah,
Yeah, economic systems, education, healthcare, and it seems like a lot of it traces back to ideas, beliefs, really, that got locked in around the Industrial Revolution.
exactly. And we've gathered some fascinating source material for this. We're talking economic history, philosophy going way back, analyses of corporate influence, big tech moves, and even some potential solutions emerging.
So the big question, I guess, is how did we get here? How did this focus on, wealth and profit lead to these massive failures? And maybe more importantly, is there a way out? Especially with things like AI coming fast.
That's the core tension. The material suggests a path, a way to maybe use technology differently, not just for profit, but for, well, actual human well-being. Think collective care.
Okay, that's the mission then. Let's unpack this legacy of disparity, look at the proposed way forward. It feels like a huge shift, right? Moving away from a system that kind of thrives on fear and greed.
It's fundamental.
All right, let's dive in. Where do we start? The economic foundation feels like the place, the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, you have to start there. The Industrial Revolution was obviously transformative, but it also massively amplified economic inequality. I mean, globally.
How so specifically?
Well, standardizing production, separating people from the tools, the land. It just created this mechanism for wealth to concentrate in very few hands. It laid the groundwork.
And that's where the early critics came in, right?
Yeah.
People like Marx and Engels.
Exactly. They saw this happening and said, hold on, their idea, communism, was a direct response. Basically, the state, acting for everyone, owns the resources, land, factories, you name it.
And the goal was to redistribute everything equally, to get rid of class differences entirely.
That was the pure idea, yeah. Total eradication of class. Now, obviously, if you look around today, no major economy is purely one thing or the other. Not the U.S., not China.
But they offer really interesting case studies, don't they, about what happens when finance kind of takes over.
They really do. Let's take the U.S. first. You've got this founding ideal, Rousseau's idea, everyone's born free and equal.
But the reality?
The reality, especially in recent decades, is this widening, almost corrosive gap. The source material points to, well, unregulated greed as a major driver.
And the biggest, most painful example has to be the Great Recession, 2007, 2009. That wasn't just bad luck, was it?
Not at all. It was largely manufactured, driven by this intense focus on making money from money financialization, they call it. Yeah. Capital accumulation, just pouring into really risky financial products.
Do you unpack that a bit? Financialization?
Sure. It basically means the financial sector, banking, insurance, real estate, grows way faster than the parts of the economy that actually, make things or provide tangible services. Banks started making huge profits, not just from lending, but from complex trading, creating these really obscure products.
Like the mortgage-backed securities, the MBS things.
Precisely. That's the infamous one. Banks were pushing out subprime mortgages loans to people they pretty much knew couldn't afford them long term.
High risk.
Extremely high risk. But instead of holding that risk, they bundled thousands of these mortgages together, sliced them up, and sold them off to investors worldwide, claiming they were safe because they were diversified.
Which sounds unethical, frankly.
It was a naked pursuit of profit with little regard for the consequences. And when the housing market inevitably turned, the whole house of cards collapsed.
The fallout was brutal. What were the numbers again?
Devastating. We're talking 20 million jobs lost in the U.S. alone. Unemployment hit 10%. The economy shrank by over 4%, the biggest drop since World War II.
But the anger wasn't just about the numbers, was it? It was the response.
Absolutely. The inequality was just laid bare. You had people losing their homes, people who'd been targeted by predatory loans, watching as the very banks that caused the mess got massive government bailouts.
And some people actually made fortunes betting against the system collapsing.
Right. Which just fueled this sense of injustice. Remember Occupy Wall Street? That was a direct reaction. People camping out, protesting the corruption, while, you literally had stories and images of bankers seeming completely detached.
Yeah, the champagne on the balcony images, it felt like the system wasn't just broken, it was rigged.
And the conclusion many drew, which the sources echo, is that capitalism, when it's not balanced by strong social policies and regulations, inherently breeds this kind of inequality. Corporate greed runs rampant, and you end up with this large group of people left behind bearing the brunt.
Okay, so that's the U.S. example. But you said this isn't just a Western issue, China.
China's fascinating because it came from the opposite direction. Under Mao, it was strict communism, the idea of everyone eating from the same big pot. Very egalitarian, but also economically stagnant and often brutal.
Then Deng Xiaoping came along.
Right. And his big shift was market reforms. His famous line was something like, "It's okay for some people to get rich first." Basically opening the door to market forces.
Which led to incredible economic growth, didn't it?
Absolutely explosive growth, lifted millions out of poverty. But
There's always a but.
the but was a dramatic rise in inequality. You saw these coastal areas, the special economic zones like Shenzhen, just take off, while the interior regions lagged way behind, created this huge inland coastal divide.
So the hypothesis here is pretty startling. Capitalism and communism, despite being ideological enemies.
Both seem to lead to significant inequality when certain forces are unleashed. The sources do note that, arguably, pure communism might maintain more equality, but only through, unnatural, forced methods that often come at a horrific human cost, like the Great Famine.
Chilling. It suggests the economic engine itself, regardless of its label, tends to widen gaps if wealth pursuit is the main goal. Okay, so if the system is geared this way, why do people go along with it? That brings us to the psychology, right? This idea about hoarding wealth.
Exactly. If the economics favor concentration, the next piece is the belief system that props it up. And a core belief, according to the material, is that accumulating more and more stuff, more wealth, is the path to happiness.
Which sounds like modern consumer culture 101.
It is. But what's really interesting is how ancient philosophy completely tears this idea apart. We have to go back to the Greeks.
Plato,
yeah. He talked about the democratic soul, not democratic politics, but a soul ruled by every passing desire, every whim. He argued the wise person lives with temperance. Reason rules. You indulge appetites just enough to quiet them so you can focus on higher things, like contemplation.
That sounds like the exact opposite of scrolling through Instagram or Amazon.
It's the total antithesis. Our society is built on generating new desires constantly. You need the latest phone, the new fashion trend. It's sold as freedom, choice, a better life.
But Plato would say,
He'd likely say your soul is just being pulled around by the nose by market forces, driven by what he called the love of reputation and the love of pleasure. You're not really free, you're just chasing the next hit.
Then Aristotle comes in. He had a different take on desire, didn't he?
He did. He argued that desire, not our intellect, is what actually moves us to act. Your rational mind only gets you going because it's focused on something you desire.
So desire is the engine, the unmoved mover.
That's the phrase, yeah. Think about it. Intellectually that exercise is good, but it's the desire for health, or maybe the desire to look good, or the desire for that post-workout feeling that actually gets you off the couch.
Okay, I see that. But if desire is the engine and our culture is constantly shaping what we desire,
then we're potentially not in the driver's seat at all. If advertisers, social media, political messaging are constantly telling us what to want, what success looks like, what happiness feels like, then consumerism can effectively rule our lives.
which makes the idea of freedom seem shallow, like just choosing between brands.
Precisely. The sources argue that real freedom isn't choosing Coke or Pepsi. It's a much deeper ability to actually choose our desires, to consciously decide what's truly valuable, what kind of life we want to aim for. It's about getting control of that unmoved mover.
That's a radical idea. Breaking free from the constant want more cycle.
It requires a conscious break, yeah.
Yeah.
Rejecting the idea that happiness is something you buy.
And how does the market keep us locked in this cycle? The sources mention fear.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Fear is a primary tool.
Mm.
Advertisers use something called fear appeal theory. Fear is primal, hardwired for survival. It makes us act.
So they create a fear, then sell the solution.
Exactly. Think about home security ads. They don't just sell locks. They sell the fear of intrusion, the fear for your family's safety. Then, conveniently, here's the product to make the fear go away.
Or insurance ads, focusing on disaster.
Same mechanism. It can be used for good. Of course, think about those heart-wrenching charity appeals that raise millions. Fear can motivate positive action.
Usually.
Far more often, it's used manipulatively for commercial gain, playing on our deepest anxieties about health, safety, social standing, and the constant exposure can actually backfire, making us kind of numb or just perpetually anxious.
So corporate power isn't just economic, it's psychological, shaping our emotions, our fears, to keep the consumption engine running.
It's deeply intertwined, controlling consciousness in a way, by controlling what we fear and what we desire.
Okay, so if the economy concentrates wealth, and our desires are manipulated by fear, where was the escape hatch supposed to be? Traditionally, we look to education, right, as a path to a better life, social mobility.
That was the promise, certainly. And economically, it made sense for a developing capitalist system. You need workers, skilled workers, wage laborers. Expanding mass education created that pipeline.
So education served the economy.
Largely, yes. It was framed ideologically as the road to success for the individual. But structurally, the way schools were often set up, hierarchies, bells, standardized tests mirrored the factory floor, the social relations of production.
But it wasn't always a smooth relationship, was it? Did the capitalists always want more education for everyone?
That's a key point in the sources. Often, no. The capitalist class historically resisted things like child labor laws or universal schooling initially. They wanted enough skilled labor to function, but maybe not so much education that it created demands for higher wages or challenged the system. They needed workers, not necessarily critical thinkers en masse.
Interesting. So there was tension there.
Definitely. And you see a contrast with, say, communist states, which often prioritize universal primary education as a state goal, albeit for their own ideological reasons. It shows education wasn't just neutral, it was tangled up in class conflict and the needs of the dominant economic system.
So the core promise was, get educated, get a better job. But now, AI seems to be throwing a massive wrench into that whole equation.
A huge one. AI, even the narrow AI we have now, systems good at specific tasks like translation or image recognition, is advancing incredibly fast, and it's laying the groundwork for much more powerful systems, maybe even artificial general intelligence someday.
And this is freaking people out about jobs, the job pessimists.
Yeah, their argument is pretty stark. They believe AI won't just automate some jobs, but will eventually make huge numbers of people fundamentally unemployable. As AI masters more complex cognitive tasks, even creative ones, what's left for humans to do for money?
But then you have the optimists saying, don't worry, new jobs will appear, jobs we can't even imagine yet.
Right, that's the historical pattern with technology. But the sources push beyond that debate. They ask a more fundamental question. Okay, let's say machines can produce abundance for everyone. Why should having a job, earning a wage, still be the only way people get income or find purpose?
So decoupling well-being from employment.
Exactly. Reminding us that things like community connection, health, respect, self-esteem, these are crucial for well-being, and they don't have to come solely from a traditional job.
This forces a conversation about values then, because the tech itself isn't good or bad, right?
Precisely. It's all about how we use it, guided by what values. Think nanotechnology, it has amazing potential, like creating cheap water filters for developing nations. It could genuinely reduce suffering and inequality. But without the right ethical framework, without integrating human values into its development and deployment, it could also be incredibly destructive. Imagine engineering catastrophes because the technical expertise wasn't matched with foresight or responsibility.
So just developing tech isn't the answer. We need an ethical upgrade too.
That's the argument. Education needs a radical shift, away from just being job training, towards becoming human value-based professional education. Teaching not just the how, but the why, the consequences, the responsibilities.
And there's data backing this up. Something about corruption.
Yeah, it's quite striking. The sources highlight a strong correlation. Countries with high levels of technology growth tend to have low levels of perceived corruption, measured by the Corruption Perception Index, or CPI.
So less corruption, more tech progress.
Or perhaps societies with stronger underlying values, honesty, transparency, accountability, are better able to develop and deploy technology effectively and ethically. Whereas in places with high corruption, tech advancements might get stalled, misused, or fail to actually help the majority or narrow the wealth gap.
It suggests that values aren't just nice-to-haves. They're essential for positive technological progress. Education needs to build both technical skill and ethical understanding.
Hand in hand. You can't separate them if the goal is genuine human progress.
Okay, so we've got a flawed economic base, manipulated desires driving consumption, and an education system struggling to adapt. It feels inevitable that the systems meant to care for us would be under immense strain. Healthcare seems like the prime example.
It really is. It's probably the most vulnerable sector because the stakes are literally life and death. Yet it's increasingly being forced into a market logic that just doesn't fit. Look at health insurance.
Yeah, the sources use India as a stark example, but the problems feel wider. It's not a safety net anymore.
It's described as a gamble. Premiums keep rising, insurers delay or deny claims. It creates this awful cycle. Healthy people can't afford it or get fed up and drop out, which leaves a pool of sicker, older people, which drives costs up even more. It spirals.
What are the specific breakdown points? You mentioned claim denials.
Yeah. Third-party administrator, or TPAs, who manage claims for insurers, are often incentivized to deny. Hospitals sometimes inflate bills, and the regulators often struggle to keep up with the complexities and the sheer volume of issues. Trust just erodes completely.
And this isn't just about frustration, right? It's a global access crisis.
The numbers are horrifying. Progress on universal health coverage, the global goal for everyone to access essential health services without financial hardship, has basically stopped since 2015. Stalled completely. In 2021, something like 4.5 billion people, over half the planet, weren't fully covered by essential health services.
Over $500 million.
And think about the cost. 2 billion people face financial hardship because of healthcare bills. Over 1 billion experience what's called catastrophic spending, meaning healthcare costs push them into or deeper into extreme poverty.
So the system designed to heal is actually impoverishing people on a massive scale.
In many cases, yes. It's a market failure with devastating human consequences.
And while these traditional models are failing, there's a new player moving in. Big tech.
Right. Healthcare is going digital health.
Well,
and that smells like opportunity and data to the tech giants. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they all see healthcare as a massive market.
what's the main draw for them?
Data. Huge amounts of incredibly valuable personal health data. It's the fuel for training next-generation AI, for developing predictive health tools, for targeted advertising. The potential profit is immense. But getting that data is tricky because it's held by hospitals and doctors.
So they partner up.
Exactly. The sources tracked dozens of major collaborations. Microsoft working with UCLA Health, Google with the Mayo Clinic, Amazon with cancer research centers. Mostly in the US so far, but the trend is global.
This feels like the market expanding its reach into the most personal parts of our lives.
It is, applying norms of efficiency, productivity, profit maximization to areas like health where they arguably don't belong. Which brings us to the philosophical counterpoint, the ethics of care.
Okay, explain that. How is it different from just, fairness or justice?
It's a fundamentally different starting point. Traditional ethics, especially liberal ones, often view people as independent, rational individuals making contracts. Justice is about impartial rules, fair distribution. The ethics of care starts by seeing people as fundamentally relational and interdependent.
Connected, not separate.
Exactly. Our identities are shaped by our relationships, family, community. So instead of focusing only on abstract rights or maximizing utility, it prioritizes caring concern for the actual specific needs of others within those relationships.
So in practice, how would that change something like welfare?
Instead of just grudgingly handing out a fair benefit based on a rule, which is the logic of justice, a care-based approach would focus on understanding the person's actual situation and providing services that express the community's genuine concern for their well-being. It's about responsiveness to particular needs.
And the core idea is that some things just shouldn't be primarily about profit.
Absolutely. The pursuit of commercial gain should not be the main driver in vital areas like healthcare, childcare, education. The ethics of care suggests we need to actively shrink the market's influence in these domains to allow other values, trust, solidarity, actual care to thrive.
Okay, so the picture's pretty bleak. A system built on individualism, driven by fear, increasingly marketized. To change course, the sources suggest we need to ask fundamentally different questions.
Right. The material boils it down to maybe 4 key questions we all need to grapple with. First, why do we always assume universal impartial rules are more important than the specific relationships, family, community that actually make us who we are? That's the ethics of care critique of pure individualism.
Okay, so
Second, are our desires truly our own? Or are they shaped by external forces like advertising? Can we consciously choose what we value, what we aim for? Can we move that unmoved mover ourselves?
that's right.
Third, how do we push back the market? How do we create spaces where values other than profit like care, trust, community can actually guide things, especially in crucial areas like health and childcare?
And the last one ties back to tech.
Fourth, how do we ensure technology actually helps people? How do we link tech advancement directly to strengthening human values and reducing corruption so it genuinely narrows the gap between rich and poor instead of widen it? And how does education support that?
These are huge questions. Abstract,
Yeah.
almost. Is there a concrete example of trying to put this into practice, using technology differently?
Yes, and this is where the MyMD.ai pilot program in Meghalaya, India comes in. It's presented as a real-world attempt to apply these principles, using AI guided by an ethic of care.
Tell us about that. Meghalaya, that's a largely rural state, right?
Very rural, about 3.5 million people across thousands of villages. The program is called Positive Public Health Management, or PPHM, and its goal is radical. Shift the entire focus from just treating sickness after it happens to actively preventing disease in the first place.
Oh, by changing behavior.
By encouraging and measuring what they call health-seeking behavior, making preventative care the norm. And it's not just tech dropped from above, it's built on a triple helix model.
Meaning?
Government, university researchers, specifically UC Berkeley here, and the technology provider, MyMDAI, all working together.
So what does MyMD.ai actually do in this system?
It provides the tech infrastructure for several key steps. It helps with large-scale health screening. It provides individuals with a personalized health assessment. It supports ongoing care programs for people identified as high risk. And crucially, it creates a health database and analytics platform for public health officials.
So they can see patterns, track progress, make better decisions for the whole population.
Exactly. And notice the objectives they measure. Increasing screening participation, understanding the baseline health of the population, and importantly, encouraging ongoing engagement with the system, like using the telemedicine app voluntarily. It's not about selling a product, it's about community health outcomes.
And how does this connect back to that bigger vision? Revolutionizing systems, maybe even consciousness?
It connects because the approach is fundamentally different. It relies on grassroots mobilization, working with existing community groups, local health workers like FSHAs and Anganwadi workers. It's about empowering the community, fostering collective well-being, not maximizing individual profit.
Okay, let's tackle the most maybe provocative idea here. The source is hinting that this kind of AI, guided by care, could control consciousness for good. Removing fear, creating happiness. That sounds utopian, maybe even a bit scary. How does the Maya model point towards that without being manipulative?
It's about contrasting the current control mechanism with this alternative. Life, now, as the sources describe it, involves consciousness being controlled by market-driven fear. Fear of sickness, fear of poverty, fear of missing out. This fear drives endless, unsatisfying consumption and hoarding. It leads to billions facing hardship.
We hoard because we're scared.
Fundamentally, yes, scared of insecurity. The Maya model future, exemplified by PPHM, offers a way out of that fear loop. By focusing on preventative care, it tackles the root anxiety about health costs. By measuring health-seeking behavior, it empowers individuals and communities to take control.
So the control isn't manipulation, it's enabling self-determination through security and health.
That seems to be the idea. Using AI as a tool for public health management, for improving overall well-being measured by things like the Human Development Product, which includes health and education, not just GDP. It's about consciously choosing different priorities. Care over profit, collective well-being over individual accumulation.
So the revolution in consciousness is shifting from being driven by fear and external desires to being able to collectively define what matters: health, community, care, and using technology to achieve those goals.
Right. The vision suggested is that by removing the crushing weight of fear and disparity, you create the conditions for genuine well-being, for that emotional state described perhaps poetically as shedding tears of happiness. It's technology fulfilling the promise of care, responding to actual human needs in a way the current market system simply can't or won't. Hashtag outro.
Well, okay, we've covered a lot of ground, from the roots of inequality in the Industrial Revolution, through philosophical critiques of desire, the crisis in education and healthcare.
All the way to this potential pivot point, exemplified by the PPHM pilot and grounded in this idea of the ethics of care.
It really feels like a call to rethink some fundamental assumptions.
It is. The shift the sources propose is moving away from seeing ourselves just as separate, competing individuals. It's about recognizing our interdependence. As one source puts it, when we only treat each other with the cool respect justice demands, that deeper social fabric of trust and mutual concern starts to fray. Care fills that gap.
So if real freedom, as Aristotle suggested, means being able to choose our own desires, to move the unmoved mover, maybe the question for everyone listening is, what's one small step you can take starting today to prioritize that kind of relational care, those human values, over the constant pressure to just consume more?
What value, beyond just market value, is truly worth fighting for in your own life, in your community?
Something to think about. That's all for this deep dive.